Take care of it.
Okay.
You're good to go.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kenneth Morefield, the owner and operator of artsandfaith.com, and I'm talking today with Justin Lin, the director of Last Days. Justin, congratulations on the film. I saw it, thought it was terrific, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, John Child's story was also featured in the 2023 documentary, The Mission. What were the features of his story that made you want to tell it as a narrative film rather than a documentary?
Well, I think for me, it was interesting. I had a very kind of there was a personal reason for me because when the story broke in 2018,
Hmm.
the airport, and I had a very strong reaction to the news. And then when they finally said John Allen Chau, 26 years old, something kind of didn't sit well with me because I was so quick. I felt like in 20 seconds I judged and dismissed him. And so it kind of stayed with me. It wasn't until I read Alex Perry's article in Outside Magazine where got a window into John through his father, Patrick, that it really kind of moved me. And that was the first time I thought I would like to try to see if I can bring this to life. And working with Ben Ripley on the script, we were working off of a lot of things that John left for us, the social media posts, his journaling. And, to me, that was my first connection with him, is that I realized he's a storyteller. There's a reason why he's choosing to leave those posts, leave those journals with us. And so a decision for me very early on was to like to not question it, because that's one thing that we all do. But then I said, well, let's maybe honor it. Let's honor what he writes and use those as pillars into our story. And there's going to be these huge gaps. And it was very clear to me he was influenced by adventure novels and Hollywood films. And so as a storyteller, for both Ben and I, we decided, well, can we use maybe potentially the same process as we're trying to find this humanity by
Hmm.
using certain kind of genre conventions and devices?
Speaking of genre conventions, I had a friend who noticed how many shots, particularly wide shots of nature and the natural world there were in the trailer and in the film itself. Um, is that something that you deliberately put in there? And could you talk a little bit about maybe you're working with the DP, your director of photography, in terms of wanting to present it visually as an adventure story?
Yeah, that obviously is a huge part of John and his love for nature, and I think, when I first decided I was going to do this, I called up Oliver, my cinematographer, and I said, let's just grab a camera. Let's get some actors and let's go and shoot with the crew of six, and let's just go and shoot for 6 months. Of course, that didn't happen because as we are developing the script, I realized to do this properly and to kind of match John's ambition, um, this needed to feel like a kind of a big Hollywood movie, And that
Hmm.
was the irony. I thought I was gonna go and make a little tiny indie movie, which it is, but then the feel of it, to do it right, I felt like I had to then go back and use all my skills to make it look like a big budget movie, with very little means. And so, it took a lot, but it took all the people that I've kind of met in my last 23 years as a filmmaker from around the world. We shot this in 38 days in 5 different countries to bring it to life. And I felt like that was important because, though it's something that's intimate, and as we're exploring and trying to find connection with John's humanity, I think we had to match his ambition, which is traveling the world, and his love for nature, and that's a big part of who he was.
So when you talk about John's ambition, one of the things that rang true to me um, in the film was the way how so many of the Christians, when they talked about missions, um, really fell back on sports metaphors and war metaphors as a way of contextualizing what they were doing. Is that something you found in John's like journal, or is something that that you feel like infected him, or was that something you noticed in the way that the world around him talked?
Yeah, we did a lot of we had a lot of dialogue with a lot of different people,
Hmm.
and the one thing that I learned is that there's no one consistent.
Yeah.
I think even with missionaries, I think the viewpoints have there's a wide range,
Hmm.
but John was definitely affected, a certain way, and I think again. It is one of these things where I just want to be clear, this movie for me is not about finding facts of what really happened, but it was trying to connect to John's humanity. So in doing that, it led us very clearly into a construct of certain characters that would kind of motivate him on this journey.
Well, that's interesting because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was that I thought that without overdoing it, the film seemed to make a point uh, about John's deep desire not just to impress other people, but to impress women specifically. Do you think that the evangelical subculture's view of masculinity shaped John or influenced his decisions to, try to um, climb the Mount Everest of, mission work?
I think you put a group of people together and it just kind of being human beings, there's certain things happen. And I
Hmm.
think you mix that in with John's ambition, his search for purpose, his search for connection, but also, I did also get a sense of him trying to defy labels and wanting to like break out. That was very clear. And I think that was the implementation of, when we were kind of building the script it was something that was very clear to us, and we wanted to kind of hopefully build that in an organic way. And I would say Sky, who plays John, he was
Hmm.
he was phenomenal, because I think in many ways we were building again, a script, a story that is very is using certain genre devices. But for that to work, I needed a buy-in from the cast to fully kind of dive in. And so
Hmm.
this is one of the few projects, and I enjoy it so much because um, this is a cast where I would say 90% of our discussion
Hmm.
was actually not about what's being shot. It was about characters outside of it. And Sky really kind of just went fully in. And I told him early on, I said, I'll give you a day. We'll do a
Hmm.
day. You can use cerebral, we can, you can judge, you can do whatever.
Hmm.
But after that day, like let's just try to find John,
Hmm.
our version, your version of John. And it was a very different process than what I'm used to, but I really and again, without the right people, it just wouldn't have been right. But I felt like the whole cast, everyone kind of committed to it, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about being non-judgmental. I've noticed that in the production notes, all of the production notes that I've gotten, you're very careful to say, I'm not religious, you know?
Yep.
Um, can you speak a little bit as to why you felt it's important or relevant to disclose that information?
I think every step of the way, I think in making the movie, I think in making the trailer, the one sheet, the one thing I wanted to be was transparent, you know.
Hmm.
I'm not going to profess to be an expert on this or that. I'm just a filmmaker, a storyteller, and I felt like it was important to be able to have that information out there if people wanted to know.
Hmm.
I think growing up as an Asian American immigrant in the 80s in Orange County,
Hmm.
it was very Christian where I grew
Hmm.
up, you know. And I think a lot of that stuff has affected me as a human being. But I also I really kind of appreciated my journey, and I felt like I didn't want to feel like I'm trying to hide something, you know.
Hmm.
I feel like being cards up on who I am, why I want to go on this journey was important to be out there if people want to know.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially given how polarizing a figure that John was. Um, you had talked about, again, in the production notes about trying to be neutral or non-judgmental. Is there a difference in your mind between being non-judgmental and still being able to recognize moral nuance or moral complexity.
Yes. I do think that, I think what that statement, because there's the tendency, and this is something that
Mhm,
was early on. Again, I had so many conversations with people. Why do I want to make this film? Am I going to give up 3 years, put
mhm,
everything on hold to make this movie? And I realized something is that a lot of filmmakers feel this pressure of having to impose their point of view on something. It's something that I think it's crept into kind of cinema and a lot of the films and TV is to say, hey, I'm floating here. Here's my point of view, but here's the characters, and that's not the movie I wanted to make, you know.
mhm.
And you know, yeah, I mean, I've had people that have watched the movie and go, wait, for the first half, I thought you were a Christian. And I'm like, cool. Well,
Mhm,
that was the thing, was that I didn't want to impose. And is there a price for it as a storyteller? I don't know, but I don't know, because I've done enough that I don't think there's any right or wrong, but you have to make certain decisions when you make these movies. And that was a decision I made, is that I didn't want to have to like put myself in my point of view, my worldview in there
mhm,
to let you know, hey, 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 I'm doing this. And so, um, and I would say that's it. I'm influenced by all these films that I think growing up made me want to be a filmmaker. And those,
mhm,
were just because I was just this working class kid, but they gave me very specific worldviews. But in the journey, I was able to connect with something with their humanity, even though a lot of these characters, cinematic characters, are so different than me. And I enjoy
mhm.
it. And I wanted that for this journey.
Yep. Well, I think my time is drawing to an end, so I'll just add, one critic's opinion. I thought you did a masterful job at that. I thought it was a very difficult needle to thread of acknowledging various, sometimes contradictory perspectives about John and what he was doing without demeaning or belittling anyone's side of it, trying to recognize the humanity and the sincerity of the people who were critical and the people who were supportive, and of John himself. So, bravo on that remark. You don't often get to see nuanced depictions of religiously motivated people, and I thought the film was very valuable and very successful at doing just that.
Thank you. Thank you so
So.
much.
Uh, Justin, thank you very much for joining me. Anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
No, as filmmakers, I think I learned early on that, for someone to kind of give us 2 hours of their lives is so meaningful. And I
Mm.
do hope that, people give us a chance. Hopefully they could go find somebody with a different worldview and have a dialogue,
So you give us 3 years of your life so that we'll give you 2 hours of our lives, that's the filmmaker's trade-off. Thank you very much, Justin. Everyone, the film is Last Days, in theaters October 2025. Go see it. Justin Lin, thank you very much.
Thank you.